This is the President of the United States committing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of American taxpayer money to continue to sustain a conflict that's already been lost, pretending that he cares about human lives, but all he's doing is guaranteeing that tens of thousands of Ukrainians are going to die in a war that could be stopped right now if the president made it stop. I hope that's the message that Steve Witkoff got from Vladimir Putin, is that this war can be stopped right now. And those numbers are Ukrainian numbers. This is the fantasy world that Ukrainian extremists who populate social media live in. And this means that the president is dealing with people who scrape social media accounts to pull together fantasy numbers and then brief the president of the United States. This is disturbing. I think we can assume that he knows nothing about what's going on in the case of Ukraine. Just the other day, he gave voice to just outlandish assessments that the Russians suffered 20,000 dead in a month. This last month, that Ukraine's only suffered 8,000 dead since January. If those are figures that he's quoting as the president of the United States, then either he is completely failing to comprehend what people are telling him, or people are just spoon feeding him garbage. You've spoken to Ray McGovern on several occasions. He used to be the man who briefed it was the CIA briefer for the presidential daily brief. I was never a briefer. I know that I have been the subject of several presidential daily briefings, and I know what goes into it. The level of scrutiny that information gets before it's included in something that's briefed before the president of the United States, considered to be the most powerful person in the world, who should only have access to the most accurate, verified, fact-based information, carefully assessed information in the world, was amazing. The CIA bent over backwards to make sure that if it got into the PDB, it was good, because you don't get second chances at that level. This is the president of the United States. This president's being fed garbage. There's no PDB. That even when they talk about the PDB, they've turned it into something like a Fox News format. So it's not, originally it's about entertaining the president. This is crap. I know Tulsi Gabbard, she's responsible for the PDB. She has a huge responsibility and overwhelming task. This president doesn't want to be briefed. How can you be briefed if you believe you know everything? This is a man who, I'm the smartest in the world about this. I know more about this than anybody. He knows nothing about anything, and he just proved it. If you really care about human life, we can stop this war. Vladimir Putin made a presentation. He said, look, Ukraine, just withdraw from our territory, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, and you'll never be part of NATO. If you say that, we'll do a ceasefire right now. Right now, we'll have a ceasefire. And then we'll talk. It's not going to be over at that point in time. It's just a ceasefire. But then they begin conflict termination discussions without anybody dying. That's what the president of the United States claims he wants. Hopefully, Putin turned to Witkoff and said, let me make it as clear as possible. We're advancing, and we will continue to advance until we've taken back all our territory. That's not Ukrainian territory. Sorry. It never will be again. It's Mother Russia. And this is the trajectory we're on. This will happen. It's inevitable. You can't stop it. Now, if you can make the Ukrainians understand that this is going to happen, that you can't stop it, and the only thing that's going to happen is that Ukraine's going to lose another couple 100,000 dead, maybe the best thing to do is just get them the hell out of there and tell them that they'll never be part of NATO. And then we begin talking at that point in time. And at that point in time, nobody's dying. The president's achieved what he claims to achieve. I hope that's what Putin told Witkoff, and I hope Witkoff comes back and tells Trump exactly that. And I hope that Trump never listens to Steve Kellogg again, because I think that's where a lot of these fanciful numbers are coming from. And I hope that Pete Hegseth takes a lead from Trump and tells people like Christopher Donahue to shut up about Kaliningrad, and maybe start telling Whitaker, the ambassador to NATO, to tone it down. If you ever call Putin, I forget what he called you, just insulting words. If you ever do that again while I'm trying to have a negotiation to bring it into a conflict, I'll fire you, arrest you, and put you in jail for the rest of your life. What kind of idiot does it take? This man's a former prosecutor. He's supposed to have a couple brain cells up there. I'm not happy about it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over that. What I lose sleep over is the movement of the Ohio-class submarines. That's problematic. What I lose sleep over is the continued desire on the part of the United States to deploy Dark Eagle to Europe. That's a hypersonic missile. But having a couple more B-61-12s stationed in England as opposed to stationed in the Netherlands, stationed in Italy, stationed in Belgium, stationed in Turkey, they're there already. I'm not happy about that. I lose sleep over the fact that the Russians have walked away from the INF self-imposed moratorium on deploying INF systems, and now the Oreshnik is in serial production and being deployed. I don't think you're old enough to remember the SS-20 crisis of the 1970s when the Soviets brought the SS-20 out. It changed everything. And now we're going to deploy Dark Eagle, and we're right back to where we were in 1985, 1986. Then we had Pershing IIs ready to strike Moscow in 7 to 12 minutes of launch. The Soviets had the SS-20s. We're going to blanket all of Europe, kill everything. Today, in a year, we're going to have the Dark Eagle that, again, can hit Moscow within minutes of launch. And the Russians have Oreshnik, which can take out everything in Europe. NATO went from saying, maybe we can do it, to saying, we're dead. The moment this happens, we all die because of this system that just overwhelms everything. And it led to a crisis where we deployed Pershing IIs and ground-launched cruise missiles to Europe and put us on the cusp of this situation spinning out of control, killing everybody, which is why we signed the INF Treaty. We're in a similar situation today because now the Oreshnik and that genie's not going back in the bottle. Wow. You think we would have learned, but we didn't. The president has surrounded himself with the worst advisors possible. Marco Rubio is horrible. Pete Hegseth is just ignorant as the day is long. There is no national security advisor anymore. Marco Rubio is dual hatting on this. What kind of idiot goes out there and badmouths President Putin at the very moment when the United States needs to encourage dialogue with President Putin? Keith Kellogg is just in Banderas law land. The only trusted person that he has out there is Steve Witkoff. And Witkoff's job isn't to actually negotiate. His job is to be a messenger, to take President Trump's message, deliver it, and receive the message from Putin. I trust Witkoff in this capacity, and we'll see. We also have to remember that Witkoff was the guy that was supposedly negotiating with the Iranians at the last minute before Israel carried out their surprise attack. So that's another problem the Russians have is, and I would have said that if, again, this is why I'll never be the president of anything, but I would have told Witkoff, you're here, but how do I know that Trump just moved 2 Ohio-class submarines closer to Russian shores? How do I know you're not here just to soften us up for the surprise attack? We can't trust you anymore. We don't trust you. We don't believe a word you say anymore. Are you sincere? I don't know. Maybe you're sincere, but is your president sincere? These are things that have to be brought back to President Trump, and he has to be told, you have to change the way you do business, because right now the way you do business is disgraceful. It discredits the United States, and it puts us in a position where when we need diplomacy the most, we can't do it because who's going to trust us? Nobody should ever trust us again. Not him, not this president. I don't think Donald Trump wakes up giving one rat's ass about the American people. He cares about Donald Trump. His administration right now is just bending over backwards to try and get him the Nobel Peace Prize. I wish we had an American president that had the discipline and the intellectual capacity and the integrity of a Vladimir Putin, and think about the general well-being of the people you're responsible for. I honestly believe when Vladimir Putin wakes up in the morning, his one driving force is, what can I do to make the life of the Russian people better? I believe it because you take a look at how he behaves and what he does. He acts on it. He's stopped 5 wars. You know that, right? He stopped all 5 of them. All 5 of the wars. And the 6th one, the big one, is Russia, and he's going to stop that too. And God, if the Russians ever say, all right, we'll do the ceasefire if the Ukrainians do this, he's going to say, I've stopped all the wars in the world. I am the ultimate peacemaker. You must give me the Nobel Peace Prize. Forget the fact that I bombed Iran in violation of international law and that I worked with the Israelis to carry out a surprise attack against Iran. Forget that little fact. That's just, come on. 2 submarines moving to Russia? Not a big deal. He hasn't stopped any wars, not a single war. Every war he thinks he stopped is still festering. And if they stopped, it wasn't because of him. India and Pakistan didn't stop fighting because of Donald Trump. Cambodia and Thailand still are hooking and jabbing. The Cambodians might want to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, but the Thais aren't, because the Thais know the truth. There's still problems there. He talked about he sent a 3-man delegation to the Congo to try and cook up a deal between Congo and Rwanda, and they had to flee for their lives. Yeah, you stopped that war, didn't you, Donnie baby? He hasn't stopped a single war. And all he does is fuel wars. He sells weapons. The he's not just a hypocrite. He's not just a liar. He's ignorant, purely ignorant. And it's all narcissist based. This is all about Donald Trump. And my God, you have a president of the United States that is going to take all this power and just focus it on making Donald Trump seem like a great guy. $60 million worth of food to Gaza, but nobody's thanked me. Nobody's thanked me at all. Why aren't you thanking me? Why aren't you making sure the food gets to the people who need it? Somebody should thank me. This is where we're at right now. When was the last time Vladimir Putin had to go on national TV and beg people to thank him for something? Never. The European Union destroyed Europe in so many ways, but one of the main ways they destroyed Europe is that Europe stopped being real, because the European Union's fake. There's no such thing as European citizenship or a European identity. There's not. But what they did is they created this fake identity, and people forgot who they were. They forgot that they were French. They forgot that they were German. Thank God the Italians got Maloney, so the Italians at least know that they're Italians. But that's probably more due to the mafia than anything else. At least the mafia is proud of being Italian. But all these nations, the Portuguese, they just run all over Europe trying to get jobs. They're not going to fight and die for Portugal. In Spain, you got the Catalonians will fight and die for Catalonia. Spanish people going to fight, and nobody's going to die for Europe. Nobody's going to die for Europe. So this is just stupid. But in Russia, Russian men are volunteering to go to the special military operation to get this thing done. They're volunteering by the tens of thousands every month. And if you invade Russia, as Germany and NATO are saying they might have to do, it's all over. Every man comes out of the woodwork, and that's it. You have to kill every Russian, and you're not going to kill every Russian. History has shown that when you piss the Russians off, they end up taking your capital city. But it's Ukraine and Russia that have to sign this treaty, not the United States. And not Europe, because you can't trust Europe either. All the Russians need is for Ukraine to say, we will never join NATO, and commit to that in a binding treaty. They don't need NATO to say, we'll never invite Ukraine, because that can change. And a president's word, if it's not backed up by a treaty, can be altered the next president that comes in. I gave my promise not to do this. I'm not you. I'm now the president, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Even though the former president said he wasn't going to do X, Y, and Z, I am, because I'm the president. And there's nothing to stop me. No binding treaty obligations. And if there were, we'd simply go to Congress and say, we're pulling out of the treaty. Yeah, the state of play of domestic American politics is such that it's created foreign policy and national security paralysis, because we're dealing with a president that's only going to be around for 3 more years. And everything he's doing is reversible under executive order. The same way he reversed Biden, he'll get reversed. And then we just find ourselves being whiplashed all over the place. Look, put yourself in President Trump's shoes, okay? First of all, he's an idiot, straight up idiot, doesn't know anything about anything. And now you're dealing with Iran. For, 25 years now, the American people have been told the Iranians are trying to build a nuclear weapon, that the Iranians are bad. And how do we reinforce the idea that the Iranians are bad? So the average American is just, all I have to do is play a couple movies. Maybe I can get Ben Affleck to make a movie about rescue. Oh, he did that already. And people watch that and they just are inherently afraid. Maybe I can get Sally Fields to do a movie about them kidnapping. It's been done. We make all sorts of movies that make the Iranians look like the worst people in the world. And now you have President Trump, and you want him to stand up and tell the truth to the American people? Then he has to explain. The Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon. Mr. President, yeah, what about that 60% enriched uranium? That's not really weapons grade. Mr. President, but do they have any use for that 60% enriched uranium? No, there is no viable use. I believe they're using as leverage against this negotiating table. Mr. President, why would they want to do leverage unless they really wanted a nuclear weapon? Mr. President, they stopped counting centrifuges 2 years ago. Do we know where all the centrifuges are? Mr. President, if we don't know where all the centrifuges are, if you're explaining, you're losing. There's an answer for this. You have to, if you know your stuff, you can negotiate. But do the people want to listen? Do they want to hear? Do they want this data? I do. You do. A handful of people out there, the facts are important. But for the average American who gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes home at night, drinks a beer, watches TV, goes to bed, repeat, rinse all over again, they don't want to sit there and listen to Scott Ritter spout out technological and technical mumbo jumbo, because all they have to do, I found this out when I was having done weapons inspection in Iraq for 7 years. I resigned on principle, making the case that the U.S. was selling a false case for war. And so the American public is preconditioned into believing anything negative about Iran. And now, so we accept at face value the notion that the Iranians are trying to illegally acquire technology to produce a nuclear weapon. And it's been political generation after political generation buying into this, because the American people aren't programmed to accept that argument. I know. I went before the American people and articulated till my face was blue that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Every word I said was proven true because it was the truth. I lived it for 7 years, but didn't matter. All Rush Limbaugh had to come out and go, Scott Ritter, he drank that Kool-Aid, baby. Oh, yeah, Scott Ritter drank the Kool-Aid. Nope, Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction. And all the Rush Limbaugh fans out there went, yep, Iraq's got weapons of mass destruction because Rush Limbaugh told me. That's how it is with Iran. And Mark Levine, all Mark Levine has to do is come, them Iranians are building a nuclear weapon. There it is. It came from Mark Levine. It's got to be true. Doesn't matter that we can get people out there and say, no, Donald Trump's not in the business of explaining the American people. He's in the business of taking the path of least resistance to achieve an outcome that's most favorable for the promotion of Donald Trump. He doesn't want to go down in history as the man who facilitated an Iranian uranium enrichment program that the American people have been told for 25 years represents an existential threat to the United States and the world. That's not Donald Trump's job. He wants to go down in history as the man who solved the problem that nobody else could solve for 25 years, the Iranian nuclear program, by eliminating it, not by saying, yeah, let's let it live and prosper and do whatever it wants to do because they're allowed to do it under Article 4 of the NPT. Donald Trump doesn't even know what Article 4 of the NPT is. That's where we're at right now. And it's a shame that the United States has come to this, where we're literally being led by a moron who's surrounded by lesser morons, none of them who know anything about anything. These are just yes men and women, with some exceptions, who tell the president what he wants to hear so that the president feels better about himself. This has nothing to do with the legitimate national security interests of America, promoting America's economic benefit, making the world a safer place to live in. It has everything to do with making sure that Donald Trump can be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. First of all, I think one of the reasons why J.D. Vance is laying low right now is because of the Epstein controversy. And he doesn't want, and I don't think Trump wants it to spill over on him. And so you keep the vice president out of these things. Although I guess there's a meeting right now with J.D. Vance about releasing the transcripts or the recordings of the most recent meeting between the federal deputy attorney general of the United States and Ghislaine Maxwell. So who knows? But yeah, J.D. Vance was always going to fight an uphill battle trying to become relevant under Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a narcissist. He's the only one that counts. Donald Trump doesn't share power. Donald Trump doesn't delegate. And Vance will be given an opportunity here, an opportunity there to shine. But look at Vance went to Munich and spoke to the Munich Security Council, and you have people, security conference, and you have people saying that, what a speech. That's one of the greatest speeches made in that conference since Vladimir Putin took down the House in 2007. Normally, a president would say, my vice president went out there and kicked ass, and I'm very good. Trump's like, you're not allowed to shine brighter than this star. So we're going to bring you back here, and we're going to snuff out the light. You don't get to go out and play anymore. And that's one of J.D. Vance's problems, is that he is a tool, but the president doesn't want to give the tool credit for anything. The only good news from the Trump perspective is that the Democrats are so god awful that they, even in an environment where they should be thriving and gaining votes and having their voice heard, they're still losing popularity because they're just that bad. They're so bad that they're losing popularity at a greater rate than Donald Trump, who's very bad. Donald Trump is not a man of character. He's not a man of courage. So he's going to take the path of least resistance. And that's the mastery of AIPAC and the whole pro-Israeli lobby, is that they have made life easier for those who support the cause of Israel. And they make life harder for those who go against it. And Donald Trump is a man that believes in taking the easy path. Look at tariffs. There's no master stroke here. He's just throwing out random numbers and then changing them and going on. Not because if he truly believed in something, he could articulate the stance he believed in. He could go out there, defend it. He could withstand the opposition. But he just tells lies. I'm gonna generate enough tariff-based income to make sure that Americans who earn less than $200,000 a year don't ever have to pay income tax again. And everybody goes, really? Oh, that's it. Get back to that. Don't pay taxes again. Not anything about Israel, Gaza, and all that. We don't have to pay taxes again. This is the code that Donald Trump has broken, as he plays to the lowest common denominator, and he can shift as the days on because the political memory of these people is zero. He just has to keep saying the right words. He'll refine his message, his lies. That's where we're at. It's not that the Israeli lobby controls Donald Trump. I don't believe they do. I believe that Donald Trump is such a weak man that he takes the path of least resistance, and the Israeli lobby provides the path of least resistance.